Today we have Mike Kokes, a great sort of development firm, a great family. It's been working for a while now on some really interesting projects. He's also super involved here at Rutgers. Me personally have been fortunate enough to have received a Kokes scholarship. He's super involved and excited to get back and connect with us today. So let's give him a good welcome.
Stand or anything?
Anywhere.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Kokes. I am the president of Kokes Properties. As I was introduced, we have a Kokes Family Scholarship that we've been doing at Rutgers for the past couple of years now. We have, I personally hired a couple Rutgers students, and I have been invited to teach some things, and then obviously you guys begrudgingly got me to come to Rutgers. I'm just tough. I don't really like to go out too much unless it's for work. I have a young family and a wife and things. So, but anyway, I'm happy to be here. And I think in these type of environments, like I've come and spoken at some of the classes and I've done some of the case study things. They're a little bit more like formalized and like just talking at you, which is like a repetition of what you're already doing in school. I would assume, I guess, but I don't want to kind of do that. So what I wanted to do was kind of talk a little bit about myself, a little bit about my experience, and then kind of provide some other little topics and things, and then kind of like some real talk, no nonsense, no bullshit conversations about what it's like to go out and try and find a job right now, what it's like to work, my own personal career path, the unique circumstances that I had, that others might have, and just kind of have a conversation or at least a dialogue about what's really going on, as opposed to like some fake school educational thing that you might hear about. So to give you a little history, so again, my dad is an immigrant from Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic. They escaped their country. My dad's second marriage, so there's a big age gap between me and my dad, so he's a lot older than me. I went to college. Well, before college, I really wanted to be in public service and be in law enforcement specifically. Living through the whole 9/11 thing, I was really inspired to try and give back to our country and do whatever I did. The military was out of the question for my parents, but I somehow figured out a way to get myself into law enforcement. So I kind of gauged my whole career around that. I actually started at Virginia Tech, and it was a gigantic school like Rutgers. I personally didn't do very well there. I had a terrible GPA and had to drop out of some courses and things, and it's interesting that kind of happened. And then I kind of found myself flying planes as like a hobby. So I was like, I want to go to aviation school. So I ended up going to a school called Embry-Riddle, which is in Daytona Beach, Florida, and flying helicopters. And I got a degree actually in Homeland Security and kind of geared everything towards that. And right around that time, we had this big thing called the Great Financial Crisis. So similar to kind of like real estate right now, where it's kind of in a lull. The whole country was in a financial lull. So finding a job was challenging, but I ended up going and finding a job back here in New Jersey and working for the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office as a detective. And I went to the police academy and kind of did that whole thing and was a detective on all kinds of cases, from suicides to drug overdoses to really kind of crazy things. And about 2 years into that, I'm like, I fucking hate this. I really don't want to do this career. I really don't like it. And it turns out I have like a very entrepreneurial type attitude where I don't like necessarily people telling me what to do all the time, or working for anybody. And the government is probably the worst place to do that because the government is the government and not very entrepreneurial. And I'll give you an example. Like when I was working, we had a case that was going on, and I was like, I need to scan some of these documents into the computer. And I asked my sergeant at the time, like, how do I do this? I don't have a scanner, and this was like, more than 10 years ago, so phones and things like that type of scanning wasn't as overly prevalent. And they're like, oh, you gotta ask Kathy. And I was like, oh, well, where's Kathy? They're like, oh, she's down the hall. But she's not here. She's actually out for 3 months. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So how are we gonna scan stuff into the computer? He's like, I don't know. And I was like, cool, me either. So it was like, that's to me the problem that I had with working with the government, but it was a good experience because doing what I do now, where I deal with a lot of government and doing public-private partnerships and redevelopment, you know, you kind of understand how government works. And there's certain people that pull the strings, and you know, those people you got to be nice to, especially if you want to get building permits or different things like that. It's really, really important to understand how the system works and the limitations of it. So 2 years in, kind of had lunch with my dad, and I was like, hey, listen, I don't really like doing this. What do you think? And he's like, why don't you come work for me? Now his story is like, hey, you came to me and we're like, why can't I come work for you? And so it's two sides to every story, but I ended up going to work for my dad, so I think it's important to understand. So when my family came here, my family was really wealthy in Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia at the time, and when they nationalized everything in communism, they took our family's business and all of our land and everything like that. And because our family, my grandfather was educated all around Europe, he spoke 7 different languages, and he actually had some connections, and they were able to get themselves out. It took 18 months through deportation camps to come to the United States. They finally got here, but they didn't have much, but my grandfather was super well educated. So he started working, I think he was working in Manhattan, if I understand, in the restaurants, because he could speak all the different languages. He developed kind of asthma-y type stuff. It was like, I want to kind of move out into the suburbs, so they ended up going down to, I think it was like Freehold or Howell area, and they were egg farmers, which is similar to like the Jason Kaplan family. Same kind of similar thing. And then the likes of ShopRite and that kind of destroyed that whole business. So my grandfather was building a couple of houses and ended up speculating on some lands. And not too far from where he bought, like 350 acres, they were selling like 1 or 2 houses. They built this thing called the Garden State Parkway. And you know, they went from selling like 4 houses a year to 1,000 houses a year. They became a public company called Eden Valley Corporation, and you know, the whole thing. So I was born, I hit the genetic lottery, right? I was born into a wealthy family. There's no way around that. I own it. I own it in situations like this. That's just the cards that I was dealt. The ironic part is, of my generation, of the 6 of us, because I've got 2 brothers and then 3 other cousins, I'm really the only one that's kind of doing anything. So you can do what you want with what you get, you know. You can start from nothing and make something. You can have nothing and have nothing. You can have something and then lose it, or you can have something and keep it. There's a million different combinations of this whole different, of the world that we got. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, because in a lot of these situations that I encounter where you read about somebody, you're like, you know, how did this person do it? And you're like, you read books about this person and you do this, and you're like, what the fuck did this person make so much money? And you're like, oh, he was born into a wealthy family. That makes a lot of sense. And it's like, a lot of people don't want to own up to that because, you know, I think somehow people look at it as diminishing what they've earned or what they've got. But I think that's bullshit. And you can either decide of how you want to take it. You can either start here and go here, start here and go here, or go here and just go down, and that's it. So that's where I've been at. Came to work for my dad. Like I mentioned, he's a lot older. We have a 45-year age gap on us. I came to work for the family business. Ironically, the guy who was doing my dad's kind of forward planning and entitlements and stuff, and if there's some of these terms that you guys don't understand, I'll try and use as basic and non-jargony language, but basically the person that got the approvals for the properties for my dad, he was kind of like my dad's right-hand guy, and he was retiring, so I was like, oh, I'll move into the office right next to you, and whatever it was, and he handed me like, you ever seen like the legal pad, like the yellow pad with like the really long one with all the lines on it? He was like, yeah, here's all the projects, and then, you know, I'll see you later. And then, like, no cell phone, nothing, disappeared to Florida, and I'm like, this is really cool. So my dad had a bunch of projects that were going on. I think 3 or 4 like bigger projects going on at the time. And you know, it's funny because throughout this whole dialogue tonight, one of the things I wrote down here, and I've had this conversation with a bunch of different younger folks that have come and worked for our company, or even talking, I have these things called adult realizations, right? So like you do these things and you're like, I don't know, like you're in college or you're doing something, or you're gonna have a child or whatever it is, and you're like, man, whatever this and that, and then you finally hits you, it's like this thing, and you're like, people really don't know what's going on most of the time, and like, they're really not, like, people don't know how to get to work or where to park or whatever it is, and like, everybody thinks things are so calculated and pre-planned, But the reality is that you have these adult realizations, you're like, yeah, nobody really knows what they're doing, and they're just kind of figuring it out. And the people that can figure it out are the ones that are doing better, right? So, come to work for my dad, I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out. And the ironic part is I had this adult realization after a year or so of working with my dad was all the things that I really was attracted to in law enforcement, or just in general in life, which was talking to people, problem solving, understanding how to do things, kind of like being tested, walking into like uncomfortable situations, which is a weird thing, but I happen to enjoy that. This is all the same stuff I was doing at my dad's company. I'm like, wow, I really like this. And I'm making a lot more money than I was at the prosecutor's office. And I don't have to worry about getting shot. And all these different things that were kind of like better, better situations. So that was one of the kind of unique adult realizations that I had. So anyway, working with my dad, it's a family business, and anybody that's worked in a family business or worked for a family business realizes that, every business has its limitations, but a family business, sometimes the limitation is in fact the family. And, I was there for a couple years, and I said to my dad, I'm like, listen, my dad had his brother as his partner, and, you would see him a couple hours a day, maybe a couple hours a week. I was like, I'm not doing this for my rest of my family, because I'm the one that's there all the time, and it creates conflict, right? So, I'd go out to the job site and drive around in my truck, I'd get out of my car, talk to people, and then people would start coming up to me and asking me questions. They're like, hey, how do we do this and this? And I'm like, well, that's not really my division, I don't really know. He's like, well, you're here, come on, your family figured it out. All right, so I try to figure it out without trying to step on people's toes, and then evidently what happens, people get upset that they're asking you questions, like, oh, you're coming on, and you're in my division, and this and that. So I said to my dad, I'm done with this, I want to start my own company. So I think it was around 2015 when I started Kokes, well, it was Homestay Capital, which is Kokes Properties, and I originally started doing limited partner investments, so I was still working full-time for my dad, but I was doing some basically doing mezz loans and things to different projects, or being a limited partner, or doing all different kinds of stuff. At the same time, again, here's like one of those genetic lottery things, like my dad had started a bank. So he's like, I have millions of shares at this bank, and we need a representative on the board. Would you like to go and serve on the board of a bank? And I was like, sure, I'll do that. So I served as a director. I think I was the youngest director in New Jersey for the board of a bank. But I learned a lot about lending and how bank works and how loan committee, and I was on a loan committee, so it was really kind of an interesting experience. But again, something that, was a really unique and fortunate thing that I got to encounter. So anyway, started my business, was doing some things were going all right. I ended up selling my dad's company, and in a bunch of different pieces. So we sold things as land. I sold the building business to Lennar. I did all in like about $140 million worth of transactions for my family, with no debt that we had on anything. So it kind of gave us a good capital infusion to restart. And from there, took one of my dad's employees. He had 130 employees. I took one of them over with me. The ironic part is that my dad's company, a lot of the people were there 20, 30 years, so they were already on the verge of retirement anyway. And I was like, I'm going to do it completely different. I'm going to do, laptops and, all cloud-based stuff and everything, which actually became very fortuitous, is that the right word? When COVID hit. Because now everybody can do accounting work from home and whatnot. So it actually worked out really well. No hard-based phones, nothing like that. So what was my goal? My goal was to just keep building shit and just keep building and building and building stuff that I liked. And, I was doing, like I said, a couple limited partner investments and stuff, and I had one deal that went bad on me. I had partners that were stealing from the company, or from the entity. So I ended up, what's the best thing you do if you have a partner that's screwing you is you buy them out. And so I ended up buying the partner out, taking the job over and building it ourselves. And then just kind of organically hiring people and whatnot, to where we are today, where we've got a few hundred apartments that, I've actually personally built and own. Not like people will come in here and be like, oh, I have thousands of units under my control, but they own like 0.1% of all those units. So I own like 400 apartments or something like that we've built and owned, and I've done that in the past 10 years or whatever it's been, 9 years. We have our own property management, our maintenance people, our own construction, our in-house accounting and all that stuff. So kind of here we are. nothing huge and glamorous, but it's a $100 million company, and I'm proud of it and excited about it. And I'm not too necessarily far ahead of where you guys are in terms of age and whatnot. So it's exciting and cool and challenging. So the biggest challenge for me has been dealing with employees and people and like growing a company. Because like adult realization, I'm like, hey man, I'm the boss. Everybody should listen to me. And everybody's like, fuck off. I'm not listening to you for anything. And I'm like, okay, well I gotta like kind of figure it out. So one of the best pieces of advice that somebody gave to me, he was a spouse of one of our employees, and we were sitting at one of our holiday parties, and he's like, how are you at sales? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really good at sales. I'm not really salesy type person. I'm more of like, where's point B, and I'll figure out how to get there, whatever it is. He's like, yeah, that's not really good, but you should be good at sales. And I was like, why should I be good at sales? I personally don't sell anything. I have leasing people or whatever. He's like, well, when you go to a town, do you convince the town to do the project that you want? And I was like, yeah. He's like, how do you do that? He's like, sales. Huh. It's like, you got people that work for you. Like, you want to convince them to do what you want to do. How do you do it? It's like, I sell them, I guess. So one of the things I will want everybody to understand in this room is sales, and understanding sales is a huge component of any business that you do. Obviously people will say like accounting and finance and whatever, and like knowledge of that is important, but understanding how to sell people, and sales is basically another term for manipulation, right? That's what it is. Like, you're trying to get people to do something that you want to do that perhaps they don't want to do. That is manipulation. That is also sales. Understand how to do that. Understand the emotional intelligence it takes to get people to do certain things. You can't beat people into submission. You can't, just demand things are done like that. Maybe in a huge corporations, I suppose, but the vast majority of you guys will work in like a small, medium-sized business. That's like the reality of here, depending on the program. And understanding how to interact with people is really important, and how to sell people, and how to like convince them and like get them to do stuff that you want to do. And that also can mean that you don't also get what you want either. Like, you got to learn how to compromise and work with people and whatnot. So one of the things that I actually did is hired a guy who is a Yale PhD, because I was having such a hard time about it, right? So like, growing companies for me was very easy, like the capital and talking to banks and getting the approvals and like putting all this stuff together. But when it came to like actually having employees, I was like a shitty boss, and that's just the reality of it. So I hired a guy. I'm like, I'm going to try and invest in myself and figure it out. And I hired a guy. I call him Dr. Paul, Paul Marciano. You can LinkedIn him or Google him or whatever it is. I'm pretty sure he was a Yale PhD, but he's a licensed clinical social worker that just happens to know a lot about business. And it was kind of cool talking to him, right? And the reality is, like, all of us kind of like mindfuck ourselves a lot, right? Given the circumstance, if you put yourself in a hard position, you're going to really screw yourself up. But that's exciting, and that's fun. And figuring out how to like navigate through that. And it's interesting to watch ourselves and look back on ourselves and reflect and go like, man, I will never do that again. Or I like the way I did that, and I'm going to do that. So the really cool part about where I am in my career at this point in time is like, I've experienced this. I know how to handle this, and I can do it, and I can do it better. The other cool thing is like let shit go. Like this morning we had a meeting, and a guy that works for me said something that was like, kind of like poking fun at, something that we've done or whatever it is. A little bit like snotty, and I was like, I could care less at this point in time. And I think all of us, if we can kind of like care a little bit less on certain things, we'll actually be a lot better. Because when you get so worked up about stuff, you just waste energy on things that are really stupid. And at the end of the day, it's all about sales. Is he still doing what I asked him to do, whatever it is? He can feel however he wants to feel. So, kind of interesting. All right, let's see here. Okay, let's talk about something that I think is really important. So, a lot of people this is a perfect example. Like, you come in this room, right? And you're like, resilient, resourceful, responsible, reinvent yourself for the digital era. Like, what the fuck does this all mean, right? Like, what does that even mean? So when I started my company, it was very clear. It's like, let's get jobs, let's build jobs, let's manage jobs, and let's figure it out. for like the first couple of years, I didn't even have an employee handbook, which was like, my attorney was like losing his complete mind that I didn't have an employee handbook. But I was like, I don't know what to put in an employee handbook. What do you put in these types of things? And so we came up with like some generic thing, because like from a legal standpoint and insurance standpoint, you have to have something. But after I've had a couple rounds of employees and a couple of years of things, I'm like, I know exactly what's going in that handbook now. It's like this and this and this and this and this and these policies. So somebody that wrote those words came up with them somewhere from something, or they hired some marketing people to do it, and whatever it is. But for me, a lot of the stuff that we've done has been very organic. So one of the things that we did, which I felt was really organic, and I got all of the different employees to be a part of it. Sometimes it's really challenging because people don't really want to participate in these types of things, is coming up with core values, right? Quality, accountability, and passion. QAP is what we have at Kokes Properties. They're very generic, but the reality is those are the things that are really important to us. It's important to all the employees. And the other thing too is when we came out with these core values, people were like, oh, that makes sense, because we kind of already do that stuff. So one of the big things for me is the passion, right? So finding a passion. So one of the things that I don't think a lot of people really fully understand is that they chase, and I see this a lot with here, and I get it, right? Because different people have different factors, and I talk to Morris Davis, and I hear all the different things, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but if you find something that you really like, it's going to be really helpful for you. And how do you find things you like? We got to try a lot of different things. Just like myself, I went to a different career. I did a couple different, career paths and weaved in and out. But, I've done a lot of kind of interesting things. And the one thing I feel very fortunate about, moreover than any type of the financial success that I have, is that I really like what I do. And the reality is, like, anybody that comes to college, like including myself, it's very linear, right? It's like, I'm gonna enroll for this class, I'm gonna take these tests, I'm gonna get out, and I'm gonna get a grade, and I'm gonna roll for the next one, take these tests, and I'm gonna get out. And it's like, you gotta take all these different classes, and they all gotta add up to a certain amount of credits, and then blah, 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 and it's like, okay, so that's a very clear A to B. But like, once you graduate, again, adult realization, you're like, what does B mean? And then some people are like, well, it's gonna get a job, and I'm gonna get a house, and I'm gonna get married, and I'm gonna have kids. But then like life comes at you and you're like, ah, damn, I got somebody pregnant that I shouldn't have got pregnant. Now I gotta try to like redo this whole thing. And it's like, oh man, I just got fired from my job and now I gotta find a new job. Life in general, at least to me, is not linear at all. It's like kind of all over the place. And I think the people that find contentness in like kind of the variability of life end up becoming more fulfilled and ultimately happier. Because at the end of the day, if I'm making $75,000 and I can get $80,000 a year or whatever it is, like, yeah, you can get more stuff. But once your basic kind of needs are met, it's all kind of irrelevant. And I can kind of assure you that's the case, and seeing it a lot over and over again. So what is my recommendation to all of you in here is like to try and figure out what you like. And like do internships, meet people, go talk to people, like sit here, go like, leave this room and go like, man, that guy's a fucking idiot. I hope I never have to hear from that person again. And if he's in real estate, I don't want to be in real estate. Or you can go to this thing and you're like, that's really exciting and I really would like to do that. Or I'm gonna try and find an internship in something like that. Or like kind of network or talk to more people like that. I presume because you're in the real estate club already, you have some baseline of like interest in it. But this is only like the scratching the surface, like going out and really like experiencing and seeing, because at the end of the day, when your like alarm clock goes off at like 6 o'clock in the morning and you're like, holy shit, I gotta do this all over again. If it's something you like to do, it's not that bad, because at the end of the day, when you get a job, it's not like linear where it's like, well, next year is done. That's not how it goes. It goes on forever until you retire or die or whatever happens. So try and find something that is exciting, and you can make money. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, don't be an artist or be. It's like just do something you like, and you'll figure out how to make a business out of it. Okay. What other things that I want to talk about here? So one of the things that I might be against the grain with, again, other than my vulgarity, is it's quite frankly, in my experience right now, dealing with a lot of different people that either employ or I work with, and perhaps even you guys see it in your own world. It's actually easier now to be successful than ever, and I'm going to explain why. there are so many people that just generally don't want to work, that that have no customer service, that don't care. I would say now is like just finding people that really are passionate and want to work hard is like a unique subset. So if anybody here, again, it goes back to the passion. If you don't care about it, then it's easy to go like, you know, whatever, I don't really care, I'll throw it away, and if I get fired or I don't make it, it doesn't matter. But follow what you like to do. And again, right now, it's just the basics. Let's see here. One of the things that you guys had asked or mentioned on your topics was about things that I do, right? So one of the things that I do on a daily basis is consume stuff. So what does that mean? My car has CNBC on all the time, constantly learning about what's going on. I am like a voracious reader. Just to get everybody a perspective here, all those bad grades that I had, I'm dyslexic. So like I have like all these little complicated little learning disabilities. Like I'm terrible at reading, but I try and I continue to read. And like speaking of like linear things A to B, I think being able to read books and complete books in my life is that A to B success thing that I get, you know, or like creating lists and like writing them, like scratching them off. Like I'll even like write stuff on there and then like cross it off immediately because I just completed it, but I want to like have the satisfaction of doing it, so I do that. But reading is super important. Reading is great because the more you read, the more you understand that what you're reading isn't always true. The more you read is that like you can read books, like I've read, name anybody, like Jamie Dimon's book, or Michael Dell's book, or Sam Dell's book, or, you know, name the 30 other really, you know, important people, and like half those books, like knowing where I'm at now, like you read these books, you're like, so much of this is bullshit. But like somebody wrote in there, it sounds really good, it sells books, it gets people energized, they're like, oh man, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna hustle today. I'm gonna grind now. You know, Jamie Dimon does this and I'm gonna do this. It's a lot of bullshit, like I'm gonna be honest with you. But at least you read it. So for me, like fiction, nonfiction, all this stuff, like super stimulate your brain and be able to like turn yourself off from like this. You know, I have 2 children, so for me, like seeing what like YouTube and iPads and things do to their brains and like how it really does make you stupid. You know what I mean? It just like, it really dulls your brain. Netflix and just staring at a TV, you know, like you can just observe, like, I don't know, if you go back to your apartment or dorm or whatever it is, and like you have roommates or not, or whatever, or like your family, and just watch people, like just take yourself away from the screen and look around, you're like, it's like the movie, you know what I mean? It's like the zombie people. So reading is super important. I have a subscription to Wall Street Journal, which I read, you know, as much as I can. It's, you know, a lot to try and get through this stuff, but I'm telling you guys, like, it's like, we've had people that come work for us, and you're like, man, did you see this or that? And they're like, no. And you're like, how do you not know? Like the Federal Reserve came out and they're like, you know, holding rates steady or doing this or that. Like our business is purely built on like finance. How do you not know what's going on? And it's like, well, the company doesn't pay for it. I've had that, and I'm like, it's like $30 a month. You know what I mean? Like how much is like, I don't know, whatever it is. Like, would you go out and buy dinner with you and your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is? Like, oh yeah. It's like, well, it's like, this is the biggest investment you can make in yourself is understanding the most current information. Do it. Or don't. I don't really care. But I'm just telling you it's going to be really impactful. One of the other things I want to say is going to like company provided stuff. Like if you do internships and things, a lot of these companies will provide you really good information to get that you might not be able to get somewhere else. But quite frankly, with like the internet and Google and things, you can find so much stuff right now. I try and post stuff personally on LinkedIn all the time to share different articles that I read because, you know, I think there's so much free stuff out there that you can get and consume and understand. I posted something that Sam Zell posted years ago about pricing and whatnot. I mean, we pay for a lot of research now in our company because I just love consuming it, but try and figure that out. Another thing that's really important for everybody in here to understand is if you don't already have one or you're about to get a job, make sure you get a 401k or an IRA and start putting money into it immediately. So we had a woman that worked for my dad. She started in, I think, 1989. She was like clerical, part-time, whatever it was, answering phones and things. I think when she retired, she was like making like 50-ish thousand a year, like just being like basic clerical type stuff. I was the 401k administrator for our company, and I was like, Joni has a 401k. I looked at it, $890,000 in a 401k, and I think the only thing she ever put in there was like a couple grand a year. But through the compounding and everything that happens, just put it in there, get super aggressive with it, and don't touch it. Just make sure if your employer has a match, we have a match, put it in there. Don't be a 401k raider and like start taking loans against it and taking stuff out. Like I'm just put it in there, forget about it. I swear, like you will have. It's the biggest change of your life you'll ever have. Okay. Other things I want to talk about. Don't be super caught up with milestones. So one of the things that I have this like kind of conversation or topic that I like to have, or there's a topic that I like to have a conversation about with different people, is the idea of being content. And people confuse content with being like not ambitious, but that's not true at all. You can be ambitious and be content. What I'm trying to get at, or the concept of being content is, and you can make progress also by being content, is not always looking for the next thing. Because a lot of people get so addicted to like the dopamine drip of like the next raise or the next job promotion or the next whatever it is. And I have seen that in my company or in the different companies that I've worked for, or my dad's or whatever it is, the people that didn't put a lot of worth into certain things that are kind of like egotistical were actually the happier people that I met. So like, we had somebody that was doing whatever it is, and obviously it's hard as a manager because people that are crybabies or complainers get the most attention, and therefore they get more whatever they want. But the problem is those same people, they're never happy because they're always looking for the next thing. And that is like a very toxic way to live your life in general. And by the way, I'm a victim of it myself, right? Like I am the same way with a lot of different stuff. But I've also learned, like, I'm aware of it, and you have to try and make sure that you pull yourself out of that to some degree. I actually just read something on the way in when I was grabbing a bite to eat about the importance of like just kind of like looking back, and the specific quote was, think about where you were 10 years ago today, and I can guarantee that you would want to be where you are now, like based upon, it's geared towards entrepreneurs and things like that. And think of how happy you are. Think of how happy you would be then, knowing where you are today. But a lot of us look at it and like, man, I got 400 units, I want 1,000 units. I want 1,000 units, I want 2,000 units. I want 2,000, I got 5,000, and it's like, it never ends. It's like the world is not enough, And there's an element of contentness, I think, that is really good for all of our mental health, you know what I mean? And, the reality of my life is, where I've been is, I went to boarding school. I went to a school called Petty. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. My roommate committed suicide. He obviously wasn't content. A lot of mental health issues and things there. And I look at it now, I'm married, I have 2 children, and my children are in travel soccer, and we're doing all these different things. And I'm like, what a permanent solution for a temporary or momentary thing. And I'm not about to be one to start saying I know anything about mental health or whatnot. And actually, a lot of the things I do right now, I'm on the board of a preferred behavioral health group, which is a larger behavioral health group in Ocean and Monmouth County, because I believe very strongly in it. But we all get down, but we gotta look at the bigger picture sometimes. And obviously, people that do certain things, there's a lot more to it than just the simplistic of me standing up here by but being content is super important, and just don't get yourself into a hole. And it goes back to the earlier thing I said about just let things roll off your back sometimes. You know what I mean? People are gonna say stupid things, like that constant, like people are picking on me, or like, you know what I mean, or someone's trying to attack me, or like, you just gotta be a fighter all the time. And it's a good place to be. Okay. Let's talk, one other thing that's kind of like fluffy, whatever, is about having an ego. So when I first started, well, specifically in law enforcement, but then when I came to work for my dad, we all come out of college or come out or whatever it is, and we are so puny in the world, and we want so hard to be somebody else or be stronger or whatever it is. So one of the things that happened to me is when I hired Dr. Paul to help me out, originally when he came to work for me, I was like, I want to be like Vanderbilt. I want to be like so-and-so. I want to be the stoic guy and quiet and mysterious, but like when I speak, people listen. And he's like, yeah, that's bullshit. Like, you're just going to be yourself, and either people are going to like that or not, and you can't be anybody else. And that's really important. I think it's really important to make sure that you just be the best self, be the best person of yourself. And Warren Buffett, which everybody knows, has a really funny quote. And he's like, the worst advice that we give to people is like, you know, I'm really good at soccer and I like baseball, but I suck at baseball. And then people will be like, well, you should really work hard at baseball. And like, it's like, no, fuck that. You want to be really good at what you're good at. And like, if you're like at a 90, push yourself to a 95 and push yourself to 100. It's so silly to try and work on things that you might not be good at. Like, take what you're really good at and be the best. Which goes back to the earlier point I wanted to make, which is about whatever you do, make yourself valuable. Make yourself valuable. Contribute back in some way or somehow, and make it, at least in work, that like your employer doesn't want to let you go, or that they maybe can't find somebody else like you, or when you're like, hey, listen, I'm making such and such money, I want to make more money, and if your employer goes, well, you're not worth that, you can either stay here or like go somewhere else, but you're staying at this level, kind of back yourself into a little bit of a corner, and don't pick fights you can't, or what's it, don't write checks you can't cash. Make yourself valuable. Figure out whatever you're good at. And the funny thing is you guys probably know more about technology than anybody else right now in the workforce. I mean, we have a guy, I have a part-time engineer in my office, so, Paul works for me. He had an engineering firm. He sold his engineering firm. He went to go work for another one, a really large one. I met him there. He retired. We stayed in touch, and I love calling people and staying in touch. Like I'm a big call people, text people, which is another point I want to make after this. I'm like, Paul, come into the office, once a week or twice a week because you're retired or whatever it is. I'm not going to give you any real responsibility, but you got a lot of institutional knowledge that's like hard to come by. You're an old guy. When I'm a young guy, I go to these meetings. I need an old guy with me, so just come with me to these stupid meetings, and it gives me more like credibility, and that's like the selling and everything. Paul, who's 73, has done more destruction to our internet than any person than any hacker could possibly do. He's deleted thousands of files off of our computer server because he logged in on his iPad and then it overwhelmed his iPad, so he just systematically started deleting all the files out of our intranet. You guys know more than like those type of people, okay? And play to it. You know what I mean? Play to doing things that other people can't. Become useful, become valuable. Because right now, the reality is you guys don't know too much about how to really work and whatever it is. But I can guarantee you that within a couple of months and a year and 2 years, you're going to know a shit ton. But in the beginning, you don't. But play to the strengths. That's what I do. You play to the things that you really know how to do. And that's super important. Goes back to the egos. Egos kill. Egos will make you broke. Egos will destroy your reputation or your career. Egos can make you lose a tremendous amount of money. And not to say that I'm anything spectacular, but the reality is I am probably the most unegotistical person. That's why when you guys were asking me to come here, I was like, I just don't like talking. I don't want to talk to people. I'm not really important. There's not really much for me to say. I guess this is proving different. But I don't have a fulfillment in my life to be in front of people doing these types of things. But I have personally seen how egos can destroy not only individuals, but families, companies, institutions. Don't do that. So one of the things that I always like to do and it's a strategy that maybe will work for you guys. It's these couple words that say, I don't know. They're like, hey, do you know how to do this? And you're like, I don't necessarily know how to do that. I know how to do this, but I don't know the answer, or whatever it is. I'm also a big explain it to me type person. Like, I hire some really smart people. I have one of my top people went to NYU. He's got a master's degree from there. I mean, he worked in gaming. I mean, he's just unbelievable. I mean, his brain is like going more computations in a second than I can do in probably a year, honestly. And I mean, he's melted 2 computers because of his Excel spreadsheets are so big. So we got him like a gaming computer. But I will often go like, I don't understand, can you explain it to me? Or can you like show me what is the most important thing? I mean, I could be like, I'm the big boss, man. I'm writing these checks for millions of dollars. I'm getting the money in. Like, I'm the guy. I should know everything. And I'm like, I really don't. So if I'm paying you $300,000 a year, explain it to me. You know what I mean? So I'm also a big fan of when we go onto our construction sites or things. I mean, like at this point in time in my career, I do know about construction. I know a lot about it. I spend a lot of time in the field. But I'll also go like, explain it to me. Show me. I want to see with my own eyes. And we had a superintendent that worked for us, and he's like, you literally do not believe that shit stinks unless you smell it yourself. And that's how I am. That's just, I want to see it. I want it. But it goes back to that's part of my fulfillment. It makes me really happy. I enjoy it. Like, it's something for me to do and exciting. So constantly learn. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, and then I guess we can do like an open discussion, right? Because we said like 8. 8:30. I don't want to keep everybody too late. It's a school night for me too. The real estate market is like sucking right now. It's pretty crappy. So don't let that discourage you if you're looking for a job and like, you know, you had people that you spoke with like a year or 2 ago or 2 years ago and they were like making a tremendous amount of money right out of college, and the market just kind of sucks right now, okay? So that's the cold reality of what's kind of happening. Does that mean that there are not jobs out there? No, I don't think that's the case. I think there's a realignment of expectations of what those jobs are. And, you know, from my perspective, again, if you're willing to like work and you can meet your basic needs, which is like servicing your debt and living and things like that, or whatever it is, of a realistic lifestyle, not like crazy lifestyle, you should be just fine. And the other thing is, like, perhaps maybe you have to go into a different direction, which you maybe didn't think was the right direction for you, but you'll eventually find yourself to where you're going to be, because every market corrects itself. This is just kind of a shitty one at the moment. And you're like, Mike, what is so shitty about this market? Well, the reality is like we came from a super low interest rate, which is keeping prices that were super inflated. I didn't buy property and that's like my job, is to buy property. I don't think we bought anything for 18 months, just because like people were paying I mean, it's all fundamentals, right? I mean, like that's like the Warren Buffett thing is, you know, you buy cash flow. People were buying projects that were like cash flow negative. And it was hot potato. It's like, I'm gonna buy a piece of property, but if I can just get it and sell it like a couple months later, and that is like literally the game of musical chairs, and people are getting so blown out right now, it's getting kind of ugly. But for somebody that wasn't doing that, I'm sitting here like, man, there's some cool deals that are kind of coming past my desk. Some of them really do suck. We're kind of going back to like the normal of like when I first started, and you have to really analyze things because stuff just does suck. Projects, to me, project specific. But people are getting really hurt right now, and it's pretty crummy, and that's impacting a lot of different things. But alas, I said there are jobs out there, but it's not like the best job market, and that's not unique to real estate. That's kind of just in general. So, but I mean, I should not have ended on a somber note. I should have ended on something more positive. I don't know. It all works out, and I think that's the reality of it. If you play the long game, real estate is 100% a long game. Anybody that thinks different, the FOMO will certainly destroy you if you know you want to play that game, and you know, taking on too much debt and whatever. So anyway, is there any questions or things that particular topics that you guys want to talk about or wanted me to elaborate on or anything?
What are the different KPIs you track for your different departments, and how do you incentivize your team to meet those KPIs?
Sure. So accountability, which is QAP, right? Quality, accountability, and passion are core values. Accountability is a huge thing. And I'm gonna be very honest with you, it is a never-ending cycle of trying to figure things out. I'll give you a perfect example, right? So we have property management, and we have, at a normal property, we have a property manager, a leasing person, a maintenance person, and perhaps maybe another maintenance person or something like that. When I first was getting into this and building out our property management, I'm like, I've got the luxury of I can pick up my phone and I have, Jonathan Schwartz from B&A, I can text him right now. Jason Kaplan, I can text him right now. Any of the, what's his name? Greg Conover from Conover Group, Jeff Long from Ingerman. I mean, I got everybody's number, Jack Morris. I can text anybody right now. So one of the things I did, I was like, hey, what do you guys do? Or hey, what do you guys do? Or I asked my employees that worked for Camson or whatever it is. I'm like, how did it work? And you know what I found out? Every single person did it different. Every single person did it different. And I'm like, damn, that really sucks, because now I gotta pick one of these shitty ways to do it and figure out my own way why this doesn't work, or whatever it is. And the reality is, like, every organization uses a different measurement tool, for, when you say incentivize or bonus people or provide financial incentives. I won't name a name, but I talked to my one close friend who was actually here today, and I was asking him, like, how do you guys do it? He's like, well, we used to do this very, specific system that was based upon NOI of the property, and, it was like a calculation or computation of this. But then I found, like, people were not taking care of the property, right? So, like, they would juice the NOI by being under budget, and then they were having lagging effects of that, where they'd have like poor customer retention or resident retention and stuff, so then like it would come out later on, and ultimately, so he's like, yeah, just do a discretionary bonus now. And the guy's got 3,500 apartments, you know what I mean? I'm like, how do you do this? And he's like, I just have a flat number, we build in the budget, and then we just shoot it out. So that's one thing. In our construction department, we do the different milestones, so like different people make different amounts based upon different milestones within the construction process. So like things like the foundation or sheathing or roof or whatever it is. It sucks. Like all this is like the worst, and human resources is honestly like the hardest part of any of this stuff. So that's one component of it. That's the financial component of it. The other things that we do is I'm very big into reports and just making it public information. So one of the things is a lot of like property management companies won't share certain expenses with their property managers and whatnot to try and like hide some of the, like how much people are making or whatever it is. And I'm like, if they're gonna be responsible for it, share the information. And if I'm underpaying them, then I should probably not be underpaying them. They should probably go somewhere else, you know what I mean? And whatever, and that's a problem that I have to fix. So being transparent was something that I was really big on promoting. I'm sure that certain people will say that I am not transparent on certain things, but that's, you gotta pick and choose, like it's a competitive edge on certain things. But I'm very big on posting numbers and sharing numbers with everybody. And like, here's the vacancy that we got. Why? Everybody has an answer why, right? Nobody will come to me, or none of you guys will be like, man, I really just suck. Like nobody does that. Like they all have a justification of why they suck or why it's not working. But trying to kind of create that dialogue. So one of the things that I try and do for accountability in general is just visit my properties. Building, right? Like this is where classes are held. And if you come here for a year, you'll walk past and you will just walk, and your brain will be thinking about something else and you won't see something. There could be like, not something egregious, but like, I don't know, something stupid. I don't know, like a broken park bench. You could walk past it like 100 times and you won't notice it. But like when I come there and I'm like, whoa, why is there a piece of garbage like right in the thing? Or like, why is there motor oil all over the parking lot over here? And they're like, oh man, I didn't see that. But they're so busy doing their tasks and stuff like that. And that's why you do need, different layers of managers and, different people to come out and check things and different levels of eyes. So Hopefully that answered your question to some degree.
When you said construction milestones, is that on budget and timeline both?
So yes. I mean, the problem is life. Like that's the adult realization of like life. Like for instance, like I'm building a house right now for myself, right? And you know, we've done millions and millions of dollars of stuff, and like the plumber just didn't show up last week. Now I might go home and tell my wife. She's like, "Why the fuck would the plumber not show up? You paid him like millions of dollars." Blah 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 blah. Screaming at him. I'm like, yeah, but he's on another job. Like I can't change that. You know what I mean? So I don't. When we do things like with our construction team, like the one guy who's building my house for our company, you can't give him a hard time about that. Like I can't yell at him, or I can't hold his money back because of that. It's really out of his purview, you know what I mean? I guess the question is, does it become guaranteed income that he's expecting? Yeah, probably, you know what I mean? Now it's just about timing. But, you know, the other thing too is like, me going and visiting my jobs. I want to give you a good example of something, okay? I think it's kind of important. When I first started my company, and I was doing like LP investments and mezz lending and things like that, I got involved in a self-storage facility, and because the way I was originally set up, I was like, I don't want to build stuff. I don't want to build things. So I hired a company, which is a really big company. They actually have a project that's like not too far away from here. I saw their big I saw their company letters. And when you do a contract with a general contractor, there's very defined timelines. And I forget the way that we structured this one, but I think it was like, if they were over certain things, there was like a GMP. It was a GMP on certain timelines, and if they went over, they would lose a certain amount of per diem day money, this and that. They went through 3 superintendents on this job, okay? We got about like 60 days out, and I'm looking around, I'm like, they're not gonna finish this thing. Now like, I forget the terminology when they get penalized for it, was like, you know, $1,500 a day. It was like, these are like, you know, not huge numbers, but it's like painful numbers. Certainly not helping their profit margin on a project. They threw people on top of each other to get this job finished. And sure as shit, they got it done in a 60-day timeline. We built that job and CO'd it February of 2020. I have had major construction defect problems on that project. We've had water infiltration problems in the office. We have had humidity and moisture problems throughout the system, throughout all the buildings. We have had corrosion issues, like with using dissimilar materials and galvanic corrosion that happens from it. A lot of bad things. Which goes back to the original thing of like, yeah, timelines are important, but I want to build right. Like if you're gonna own this stuff, make sure you build it right. You know what I mean? And that kind of goes for everything. If you're gonna do it, just be honest. Be like, I can't meet this deadline. So I'm always balancing like people sandbagging things and being like, oh, it's gonna take me 18 months to build this. And I'm like, it should probably take me like 14 months to build it. But they kind of know my personality, so it's like the realistic expectation. The problem it goes back to is like the carry cost and all that stuff like that and whatever. But in my experience, like construction defect issues later on are way more expensive than the immediate hit for that stuff. So.
You mentioned, you hear about private-public partnerships along development. I just wanted to ask, what does that look like for your company, and why do you decide to do that?
Yeah, so I have been personally involved. So private-public partnerships are most commonly found, at least in what I do, in like redevelopment areas, right? So like a town will have like a redevelopment. Either they'll designate a property as a redevelopment zone already and then like look for a developer, or in some of my cases, I think I've done it now five or so times, where we've taken a piece of property and then got it designated as a redevelopment area and walked into the entitlement process. It's a really kind of, what's it called, serendipitous, or no, it's like a current thing, because we're applying for an RFQ right now for a piece of property. So a town put out a request for qualifications, and the mayor, reached out to me directly and was like, hey, by the way, we have an RFQ open, would you want to apply for it? So we're putting together a whole package right now at the moment. A public-private partnership, I love. I love them because it literally plays to all of my strengths in terms of like being able to work with the town and talk with the town. I love going to, because with a public-private partnership, not only do you have to go to the planning board, but you have to get the town council or whoever else, you know, the mayor and all those people, and you gotta convince not only one team, but you gotta convince two teams, and you gotta make sure everybody kind of is on board, and I love that shit. It's like the best. It's like, they also can provide some of the best projects, and for me, in most cases, it's not as competitive as like some other projects might be, so it kind of plays to that strength that I have, where I can just kind of like talk my way through things. I like it because you also develop relationships with the different people. So for instance, in one of the towns, like the township administrator, it's a small town that we've dealt with. You know, in some of these bigger towns, people are full-time employees or salary, whatever it is. In some of the smaller towns, you know, you look at these places and they have like 1 or 2 full-time employees, right? So like this person is like not only like the sewage authority, they're the planning board secretary, the township administrator, the, you know, assistant clerk. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but they do everything. And in this case with this woman, she was like, you know, I talk about like, I don't know, like they've never really had like development on this scale before. She's like, I don't really know how to do this. And I was like, let me walk you through it. And it plays to this big thing, which I believe in is a huge thing, is trust, right? Because trust is a huge component of any business. And if you can't trust people, or you don't trust somebody, it's pretty catastrophic. Which kind of goes also to reputation, which is actually a point that I should have probably spoke about, but it's something that's very important to me. But the public-private partnership is awesome to me. And they're hard to do, right? Because and the other thing too is one of the challenges with a public-private partnership is, at least in my case, I've been in certain situations where you get involved in a town, and then a whole administration changes over, and they might not like the project. They might have got elected because they hate your project. That's a really challenging place to be, but it's exciting. So then the other thing from the public-private partners, you can do like pilots, you can do RABs, the redevelopment area bonds. There's so many different components of it that are benefits for it. So. That's that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, you said that like you're getting a couple of good deals coming across your desk. I was wondering if you could like expand upon like the characteristics you find in a good deal.
Sure.
Location.
Yeah.
Where are they located?
Just says it'd be nice.
Yeah. So what is a good deal? Okay, so a good deal to me starts out with reasonable pricing expectations, right? So like something that you kind of generally know. And when we evaluate a deal, we look at a whole bunch of different components of it. And being a developer is really unique because conventional wisdom in development doesn't work. Like just because you're like, oh, this would be a great place for apartments. And in like New Jersey, you're like, no, they want like a Qdoba or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, or they want like, I don't know, like a senior living or something. I don't know. So one of the things that we do is we have a bunch of different programs, but this is like, we're just kind of like, if you want to be in development, being around it is the best thing you can do because it's kind of like an intuition, because you can have the smartest people. And it's funny because in my company, you know, you're like, well, why should they respect Mike? You know what I mean? He's a young guy, this and that. He's kind of had all the, but I know development and I know entitlements, and like, if you talk to anybody in my teams, like they might not like certain things about me, but they know they will not question my ability to get approvals and whatnot. And a good deal to me has all the basic characters. So you have the size, right, or like the scale of what you're trying to get. So like for instance, like we look for a lot of things that are like 50 to 150 apartments. Can you do that, right? So redevelopment, you can be as small as like 5 acres, or if you're doing like kind of like a farm, it's like 10 to 15 acres. So type of stuff like that coming to you. You have to look at kind of like the general stuff about wetlands and understanding that. Site constraints. So stormwater is a big component of what controls development in New Jersey. So like in redevelopment, you can tie into the existing stormwater. If it's 100% impervious already, you can continue with that and kind of make a claim for that. But if you're doing something new, like a farm, you have to think about that. For me, I know like the stormwater regs, it goes back to like constantly learning, constantly reading. I go to like all these different seminars. I speak with my engineers, I go, I don't know, explain it to me, and like they'll educate you, you know what I mean? So understanding that type of stuff, the zoning generally to be good. We find all these different components, and then I'm like, let me go talk to the town and see what they think. Because the best approvals are the places where they want you to do that. If you try and go in and like sue and whatever, and that works, you know what I mean? People buy land. It was more common back in the day where people would speculate, buy land, go to the town, you know, lobby to get it done and go that way, but that is like a really risky proposition right now, especially where land prices are in general, and I don't expect them to go down too terribly much, but, you know, it could happen. But the vast majority of like landowners that I come across don't have any debt on their property, so they have no motivation to sell at all, unless it's like they die and their kids get it and they're like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Well, I hate to say it, but like a lot of the jobs that we go at, we like look. We spend, you know, $10,000 or $15,000 in pursuit costs, and then the job dies. And that's just like, that's the cost of doing business. That's like the development world. You just gotta expend resources, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, then have it in the budget. You know what I mean? It's not gonna kill you. Goes back to the previous thing I said about ego, is that when you can't let it go, I've seen people that just like can't let it go, and it sinks them. The best thing is to cut it like cancer. Just get it off. Move on to the next job. That's just kind of the best advice. I don't know if I answered your question about what I look for or not, but it's such a nuanced question. It's kind of hard to, you know, come work with me. We'll figure it out. I'll show you.
I kind of have two questions in one. I guess the first question is kind of how do you go about hiring talent? Like when you first started, like did you kind of just eat shit a little bit? You kind of just like work your way through. You know, it's kind of hard. Like always, like when you start off, you're just by yourself. And
Yeah.
over time, you try to find people because you know you have to go in a certain direction. And the second question is, at what point did you hire? Like, was there like a certain cash flow that you had to get to in your business, or did you kind of hire immediately because it was new? Like,
Yeah.
did you have to put like systems in place in order to be able to hire?
Okay, so let's stick with the first one. So I think, as I said before, like the hardest part for me was like growing, like having people. Like I'm really good at getting approvals and going out and doing that type of stuff. It's like, and I'm also not bad at delegating, but it's just kind of like managing all that, and like everything is complicated. I will tell you that like now, and I feel like it disheartens some people, but I kind of know who's gonna work. Like I can, when I meet somebody or interview somebody, I can go and go, yeah, I think this is gonna work. Or I go like, this is just not gonna work. And there's a lot of things. Like one of the telltale things of people that don't work well in my company is when I'm like sitting with somebody, I'm like, so what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to do what you're doing. And I'm like, that's not gonna fucking work. You know what I mean? Like, and dude, I'm not even kidding you. Like I've had no short of like a half a dozen or so people say that to me in an interview, and I'm like, how do you even lead with that? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I want to be you. Well, no, like you can't be me. You can be you. You know what I mean? You can start this and do it on your own. But like, this isn't like a public company where you can just step in. You know what I mean? Like, I've got like a lot of personal guarantees on loan. Like, there's so much components to this. You know what I mean? So I thought that was interesting. When to take the next step, right? So I had a guy that I was friendly with, who was an older guy, and he like gave me like the IBM brochure of the life cycle of a company. And it's like, you start here, and there's like a quadrifold thing, and it's like here, and then here, and then here, and then here. And you're like, wow, it's like that linear thing I was talking about. And the reality is like, it just doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? And the reality of it is, I wish I could better articulate to you what was in it for me about growing something, that I was like, yeah, this is the right time to do it. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? You just kind of like fill needs. I had this conversation with my wife once, and it kind of like bothered her, which I thought was interesting. And then I kind of learned my lesson about talking about work with certain things. But I said to her, I was like, I'm kind of like getting the shit kicked out of me at work, right? Like people are kind of like walking all over me, and it's like, it's not that they were disrespectful, but like, the problem is I was like, I always worked with other people, so we were like, we're all on the same team. But then when you become like an owner or a boss, like, we're on the same team, but like, yeah, I'm the beneficiary of your hard work and stuff, so it's like a different dynamic. And I said to her, I'm like, I kind of got to become like a little bit more of a dick. She's like, you can't be a dick, and how could you say that? She like almost thought I was like I was like changing, you know what I mean? But it's like fucking survival, you know what I mean? Like I can't keep living like this, like getting the shit kicked out of me every single day. So to answer your question, there was no defining moment, and I'm gonna be honest with you, like one of the really challenging parts about real estate is cash flow. It's like I did one job we did, I did it all by ourselves, all by myself, right? Like no other partners or anything like that. No limited partners. I mean, I put $7 million of my own cash in that deal, and I didn't see a dime for 4 years. And at some point in time, you're like questioning, like, what the fuck am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, I got so much money in here, and then I said to you before, one of the big things about real estate is capital allocation, learning how to do it. And to your point, like I said about, if you fall in love with something and marry, and you're like, I'm putting all my eggs in this basket. If that thing blows up, you are so screwed. Like you just like, you know what I mean? Like just kiss your ass goodbye. And I've seen it, man. I have done deals. So when I first started doing those LP investments, a couple of guys that I was doing LP investments were people that got bankruptcies from the great financial crisis. I'm going to tell you, I can guarantee you some of those people have been in this either in this real estate club talking to you or in the Rutgers school talking to you guys, and you're like, man, that guy's fucking successful. That guy was broke as shit 10 years ago. A little bit more than 10 years ago when I started doing these type of deals. I guess to the other point of like, there's no linear line from A to B is, if the guy likes to ride, he's on the roller coaster and he enjoys it, then who gives a shit? You know what I mean? But I don't want to do that. I don't want to be on that roller coaster. I want to like have that like incremental rise, you know what I mean? And then someday I'll be like, I'm done, and then I pull the ripcord and get out. But there are people that want to ride the dragon, you know what I mean? And that's the way it is, you know what I mean? So that being said, you know, like I'm a very well capitalized person. We have like strong balance sheet or whatever it is. I've never been worried about failing. I've never thought about it. Like my mom of all people was like, and like she's lived with my dad and he's been successful and he's taken a tremendous amount of risk. She's like, well, aren't you nervous about failing, Mike? And I'm like, I don't think about it, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't, you know what I mean? I've been able to thankfully navigate it so far. And even the past, you know, through COVID and what we're going through now and doing all right. But the big thing is cash flow. And then I want to give you one more caveat. And this is like, I think really important for anybody that wants to be an entrepreneur in this room, okay? It's really easy to hire people. Super easy to hire people. It really sucks firing people and letting people go. I personally take it on, like, I mean, I have at least 2 single moms that I know that work for me, you know what I mean? And balancing their schedules and dealing with that, and I'm like, thankfully they don't suck, but if I had to like let one of them go, it would really be painful for me to think about that whole, you know, and the responsibilities they have and everything. But not only single mom, but there's other guys that we have that, you know, one of our employees, his wife just got pregnant, they're having a baby, and I'm, you know, he's got the medical plan through us, and like, you know, it's like, it's really hard to like, so not only fire, but letting people go, and I guess my point is like, it's a huge responsibility being an employer, and don't take it lightly. The balancing act, and I got 2 points to this. When you start hiring people, and the economy is doing really well, all your employees want to hire more people, because they're like, oh, you know, I hate approving invoices, so let's hire an AP clerk. Or like, oh man, I really hate bidding out stuff. Let's hire an estimator. And my job has always been like, no, we don't need that. You can do that. You can do that. We actually had some natural attrition last year for people leaving. They went and got better jobs and then lost those better jobs. But it was a good opportunity for me to be like, hey, remember that stuff you used to do like this? Like, you know, time to start doing that again because we're not hiring somebody else for that position. And it's like, it's kind of a hard conversation to have. And you look as the dick or the bad guy. The other component I want to talk about of that question that you had, you walk in any of this room, right? I mean, it didn't happen here, but it usually does happen. And people go, how many employees do you have? And you're like, what does what indication of size does that, but in most people's minds, like, dude, you got 100 employees, or 200 employees, or 1,000 employees, huge company. Why don't you ever ask me like what my profit per employee is? Why don't you look at like how large the company is and how efficiently I run it with less people, or how much I outsource, or whatever it is. The point I'm making is that there's a tremendous amount of external pressure to continue to hire and hire and hire and hire and hire, and it just becomes problematic. And when that payroll hits, like either whether you do it weekly or every 2 weeks, and you see the number as like an owner, and you're like, there's a lot of freaking money that is getting spent here. What I prefer to do, and we've done this, so we had that natural attrition. We actually had money in the budget for this year, and I said to 3 of the people, so-and-so is not gonna be here, you know, obviously, you know, that she left or whatever it is. If you guys don't mind stepping up, we'll split part of her thing into you guys. They were more than happy. Ironically, it made certain people work a little bit harder, which is kind of a little bit irritating, but I get it because whatever. But we try and do stuff like that too, like moving money around and stuff. But it's hard. And again, I think a lot of people also believe, and this is my final point, I can probably talk about this like one topic forever, is like, oh, well, if I continue to hire more people, like my business will be more successful. No, that is not how it works. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta like be successful or be doing something successful, or at least going the right way. And I look at it a little bit different in the sense that employees are like an investment. You invest into them and then stuff can come out of it. But just hiring people to do shit is like the worst. And then like, and if any of you guys have been working for companies or intern at a place and you're like, dude, what does that person do? It's like somebody's overhired and there's no work for them to even do. So they're just trying to fill up their day either pestering other people or doing something destructive or whatever it is, or just hiding, you know? So, all right, hopefully I beat that one down.
Yeah, I guess, last question, but, you know, I know you said your family, you know, was in real estate and you know, you had a pretty unique background with government and criminal justice, but what was the learning curve like specifically for you breaking in? And in terms of, I don't know if you call this market distress, but you kind of alluded to it before, how do you maximize that curve in today's environment?
Learning curve getting into it. So I've been real with you guys the whole night. I like learning. So I don't feel like it was a learning curve. I'm sure that somebody was like, he's stupid, but I didn't feel that way. I just kind of kept like learning every day. So there's certain things. Oh, I will say that you will fuck shit up. Like I fucked so many things up. Like I did things and I'm like, should not have done that, and I will not do that again next time. Like everybody in this room will do this at some point in time where you will make a huge error. Just make sure it's not like huge money-wise or huge reputational-wise, but like saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, you know, shooting off an email, like whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like, by the way, do not email people drunk, or high or anything. I promise you, it does not end well. And if you are tempted, like just turn your email off, like, you know what I mean, or whatever it is, because I've seen some people get to like, I personally have never had an issue, but I've seen some bad things happen from that. So, I don't know, man. I never personally felt like it was a huge learning curve, but I also feel like I'm not even off the curve yet. I'm still learning every day, all right? Okay, so the second part of the question was about distress. We are so used to like instantaneous things, and that's the one problem if you watch like CNBC or Bloomberg, whatever it is, and it's like, well, interest rates went up and like distressed real estate tomorrow. It's like, well, that's not necessarily how it works. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some precipice or something, some factor that's pushing on certain things. So like I said about the land, right? A lot of the people that I deal with lands, like they own it free and clear. They don't have to sell it. It doesn't generate any income for them now. It's taxed at whatever it's taxed at. So it's not like those land prices are plummeting. It's just not the case. There's a lot of things that people keep talking about, like so, like some of the office spaces, like those are certainly distressed, right? Like the problem with those loans and things that are going on right now. Well, first off, there's nobody even in those buildings, so it's just an expense. They can't service the debt, so the debt can either be distressed in that way, the banks will try and work something out, but they're going to try and just fire sale things. But the banks don't even want to lend money to that. You know, I'm on the advisory board of Provident Bank. I go on vacation with Tony Lavazetta. We do all kinds of stuff, blah, 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 this and that. I'm very close with all those guys. They don't want to take property back. You know what I mean? Like the last thing a bank wants to do is foreclose on you. People think like, oh, banks love foreclosing. They hate foreclosing. Like they don't want to do that. So they want to pretend, extend, do all this stuff, all the little nomenclatures. But we'll start to see really distressed stuff if the economy really starts to take a dump. So commercial real estate is in a weird spot because rates are higher and it's kind of like frozen the market. But unless the consumer drives everything in the United States. So if the consumer's bad, everything else is bad. You know, like people like talk about auto loans and things or whatever it is. If people start to have really massive layoffs and the companies, like I look at all the layoff numbers constantly to trying to like gauge what's going on. Most of the stuff that I have, apartments and stuff, like it's not impacted by like the tech sector or stuff like that. These are like normal, like run of the mill, like I got nurses and like I have FBI agents or like you know, people that work at Amazon driving trucks, and like those are the people who are my tenants. Those people are in demand. But if something happens so catastrophic to our country where the economy really takes a dump on these people, then we're going to be in a bad spot. And that's when you're going to see really distressed real estate. Right now, it's like the market's not necessarily distressed, but all those like speculators are out. That's all gone. And you're seeing some people, like the people that overpaid and stuff like that, and you know did like the floating rate debt. Those guys are really hurting right now, especially with limited partners and stuff that are involved in those deals. So just always be careful. And that's I think I would like to end on this whole thing is like just be cautious, you know, with what you invest in, and make sure whatever learning experiences you have, because you will have them, just make sure they don't wipe you out. Because you know what I mean? Like if you have like a house that's got, say you buy like a duplex and you're like, oh, this is gonna be great, I got rental and this and that, blah, 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 and then like the foundation is like not structurally sound or something, you are so screwed. You know what I mean? Because now you got a piece of shit. You can't people in there. You're gonna come up with money to fix it. You got reputational things. Like, just be cautious. Take risks, but be cautious. So anyway, thanks. You're gonna have to edit this because I cursed too much.
It's honest. Yeah, so next week we have Ben Grippy.